welcome to my first video, and this is about Python. This is an introduction to the coding language or programming language called Python. It's a very versatile. By means of it can be used for many things. Like number crunching is I guess you can consider its primary use, but that doesn't mean it's only limited to that. It can be used for game development, but again, since it's versatile, it's limited in that sense. Okay, so let's get started. The IDE we're using, by the way, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. That's where you develop programs from scratch. So the one we're going to be using is PyCharm. You can use any you want, but if you want to use PyCharm and you haven't downloaded it yet, then you can download it from the JetBrains website. They develop many IDEs for different languages like Java, JavaScript, and of course Python. Okay, so what we're going to do is if you don't already have a project you want to start from, you can just click on New Project, title it whatever you want here. I'm just going to title it First My Project. Okay, you don't need to deal with any of this unless you want to change the location to a specific folder or directory. It's your choice, but I'm not going to dabble with that. So I'm going to create it. Okay, and you can see that it opens up a file. If this happens to you, don't worry about it. If you don't understand any of this yet, don't worry about that either. But what we're going to do is just we're in main.py. This is a default file it opens when you begin the IDE, when you start up the IDE. So what we're going to do, new Python file under the file you're already in, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to name it practice 1. And here, you don't need to worry about the directory here. Honestly, I'm not minding it right now. It might, obviously, it's probably not in this place that I want it right now, but for the sake of this video, all we're going to do is just practice the basic syntax to get you introduced to Python. So don't mind the directories over here. So we're going to start off with the most basic statement. It's pretty much in all coding languages, is just to get text put into this over here. And what this is called is the console. A console is in every programming language, no matter where you go. And what it has is just this simple output of whatever program you code up here. Okay, so what we're going to start with is a simple print statement. Okay, so this print statement allows you to basically put any text you want or just anything into this console, any value. Obviously that has exceptions, and we'll get into that later on, but for now you can just consider it allowing you to put any text on there. What text is called in pretty much any programming languages, in any programming language, is a string. A string is usually represented by str, but we'll get into the data types afterwards. So let's say hello world. That's what we want to put down here. Okay, so we can just run it using this run button. So you see that print allows you just to basically output anything you want, essentially for now anything, to the console. So what we're going to do now is just take a look at the basic elements and aspects of the PyCharm IDE. If you're not using it, you can skip ahead, but for those using it, as I said, that this is the console, just shows the basic output. Uh, for most programs, you'll have your output in the console. Unless you're dealing with like game development, you'll have your own screen that you create. So that's the console. The terminal is here. What this basically does is this is basically running your program with manual input and navigating through. It's if you're using the Windows operating system, then it's practically the same thing as your command prompt. If you're in Mac, then you just call it terminal, as it says here. So those are like the basic parts of the PyCharm IDE. And what we want to do now is you guys came here for Python, so I'll give you Python. Comments. Comments in any programming language are very, very important. And that's not for the computer itself. This is like one of the only parts of programs that is not for the computer. It's for humans, actually. It's for human readability. So say we take this, for example, and we want to comment about that. What we would do is put this hash mark here, hashtag, what you would call it, whatever you want to call it. I just call it a hashtag in this case. You just put that symbol, and that indicates a single line comment. So you can put whatever here, and your program will still run the same way. As you can see, we still got the same output. Okay. So what the importance of comments is because when you get into higher level programs where you're dealing with multiple files, a lot of functionality, and complex logic, uh, different developers will be working on the same project, like multiple developers, sometimes like 2 to 3. Okay, so comments help developers, programmers, whatever. It just helps other humans understand the code one has written. So say you have written this, and another programmer on your team for whatever, like say you're developing a simple application. Say another developer comes into this file and doesn't know what this line does. Your comment can help them understand it. So this would help them understand what this line does. And yeah, so just commenting about the functionality of different parts of the program. And it may seem like I'm over explaining these terms right now, but trust me, it will come in useful later on, since these are the very bare fundamentals of pretty much any programming language. Obviously not the same syntax, but for Python, it is a very user-friendly language compared to the other languages like Java, JavaScript, and lower languages like C. Uh, but what you're worrying about right now is just the basic fundamentals of Python. So these two things you know now, the print function and comments. Two very important and useful parts of Python. So now we're going to look at one last thing, and they're called data types. In any programming language you decide to program in, do anything in, you have data types. And there are the primitive data types, like the most common, like ultimately built-in recognized, anything synonymous with that. Each coding language has its own primitive data types, like ones that are built in and are automatically recognized into that language. In terms of Python, the those data types are integers. I'm just going to put this in a comment because I don't want it to be run by the IDE. So there are integers, booleans, and I'll explain these in just a second. There are integers, booleans, lists. I can assume you already know what lists are because it's self-explanatory, but I'll still explain it. tuples, floats, and those are pretty much the main ones that you would need to know in the beginning. So what integers are, if you really don't know what integers are right now, they're basically any whole number. That can be negative, positive, but it can't be zero. Zero is not an integer. Oh no, sorry, zero is included. That is my bad. Okay, so it's basically any whole number. Booleans are true and false. True and false values. This will come in useful when you're dealing with loops and when you're checking conditions. Because when you have conditions later on, and don't worry if you don't know what conditions are, but for those that might already have experience with some programming, other programming languages at least, they'll probably know these already, but true and false are for conditions and control flow and all of that stuff. Lists are defined by these regular brackets, the square brackets, I guess you can call them. And what they are immutable sets of data. So let's say L, and I'll just give you a crash course on variables right now. If you've done at least basic math, you would know what variables are. They are just symbols, in this case letters, that can hold any value. They're not constant, they're the opposite of constants, which are defined numbers. That can't change. So let's say we want a list called L, and you can put any values you want in here. For the sake of this video, we're only going to put values of one data type. We're just going to put integers. We can put any integers we want, as many as we want. Let's say we put 1, 2, 56, 32. You can put as many as you want. It really doesn't matter right now. Obviously, you'll get more specific about the runtime and everything of the more minor computer science behind each program later on, but right now you're not concerned about that. So we have a list of 4 elements, okay, 4 elements called L. And what lists are mutable. So what we can do is, here's just an example of what you can do with a list. Append, I'll get more specific about what you can do with the lists, and they're mutable. So mutable means you can remove elements from them, change elements in the list, add elements to them, basically just change it as a whole. Okay? So what l.append does is just adds a value to the back or end of the list. So say I wanted to add the value 4. What this append does, it's basically an attribute of lists. You can append elements to the end or back of lists. So they're mutable. Remember that. And that aspect of them is very important in terms of referring to tuples. So tuples are symbolized and actually initialized with these types of brackets. So these are parentheses, okay? That's the correct term for them. They're parentheses. Brackets are these. Parentheses are these. Okay? So what tuples are, they're immutable. So they can't be changed. Once you initialize them, really nothing can be changed about them, about the tuple. So let's initialize the tuple t and set it to, again, use parentheses. And you can put any values you want again. But the thing is with tuples, you can't remove any elements, add any of them. Again, you can't change them in any way. You can't even add or remove any elements from it. So you might be wondering, why not just always use lists and never tuples? And the answer is a little situational, but it's really when you want a specific data set to never change. Let's say Obviously, this is a hypothetical situation. You most likely wouldn't do this, but let's say you're listing all the integers up to 100, okay? All the positive integers, so all the natural numbers, but only up to 100. Those can't change no matter what. Mathematically, they can't. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 100. All those regular counting numbers, and so you would probably want to put them into a tuple if you're going to be operating on them or anything. So you won't be able to change this. What you can think of think of tuples, what you can consider them as for now is just a constant. A constant in math is again a number that can't change, like a value that can't change. What you can think of a tuple for now is just a constant, but with many numbers in it, many elements. That's how you can think of it. Okay, floats are, what you can think of them right now about them is they're just decimal numbers, to put it into simple terms. Okay, so you want precision. You can just a random variable, let's call it a. It can be 7.7 or something. Okay. So 7.7. Now A holds the value of 7.7. So whenever you refer to A, you're referring to this value, 7.7, or whatever value you put in there, 7.6 or 3 or anything you want. Okay, you can even go a little bit further with more precision. It really doesn't matter. Yes, floats actually have a decimal point limit. I believe it's 6. But we're not going to be worrying about that right now because, again, the precision doesn't matter too much when you're just beginning with Python or any programming language, really. And so, yeah, floats are just decimal numbers. That's all you need to know about them right now. Okay, so that's all for now. That's a quick introduction to Python. I know it was a bit lengthy, maybe a little bit redundant, but trust me, it will come in useful later on.